John Schneider and the Seahawks continue to receive praise from most draft analysts for their 2025 NFL draft. Would Rob and I think of all 11 picks? We're going to be dishing out our post-draft grades here on a jam-packed Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in, whether you're in Grandview, Washington, or Raleigh, North Carolina. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for listening in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. It's only been 72 hours since the conclusion of the NFL draft, but everybody's getting their grades in for all 32 teams. We're going to dish out our grades for each individual pick for the Seahawks coming up today, all 11 selections. And then we're going to dive into the reported signings in the undrafted realm as the Seahawks look for their next couple undrafted gems after the 7th round. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at Amazon and the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox, no console needed. Head to amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. Now for your lead story here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Everybody in the NFL world seems to think that they are a teacher this week. Rob, it isn't just you. All of us are dishing out our grades. You and I, at least we can say we have teaching backgrounds, but dishing out grades for all 32 teams, or if it's a beat reporter like myself, dishing out individual grades for each player. And we are going to go down that road ourselves today. And there's a number of different factors that we are going to be looking at as we compile these grades. It's positional value. It's the pick in the draft. Obviously, a first rounder is way more valuable than pick 238 in the 7th round. We're going to look at scheme fit, and we are also going to look at the players that were potentially still available on the board when that selection was made. These are all factors to consider here. So without further ado, let's get to it here. Our first selection, pick number 18, Grey Zabel out of North Dakota State. Obviously, Rob, from a positional value standpoint, not a lot of guards get picked in the first round. But in terms of team needs, this was at the very top of the list for the Seahawks, and a player in Zabel that's super athletic. He fits the scheme to a T. I'm giving this one an A-. Maybe not the absolute perfect selection, but with what was on the board, what the Seahawks needed, and the upside of this player, I don't see how you can give less than an A-. It seemed like a home run selection in many ways.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. A- is the same grade I gave him. I do have some reservations, as we talked about before, about just how narrow his shoulders are, how narrow his hips are. That to me is a possible concern when you consider just how big and burly and powerful some of the interior defensive tackles are in the NFL. But at the same time, I think from a schematic standpoint that he is a home run selection here for the Seahawks, just because he does fit into their scheme. He did prove at the Senior Bowl incredibly able to just to be able to handle those bull rushes and anchor against power. And then obviously the positional versatility for a team that has struggled with injuries and any type of consistency along the offensive line. I also gave him an A-. And I think that it is hard to argue any grade lower than that, as you just articulated.
Going to the 2nd round, pick 35, the Seahawks traded up to that selection, packaging a 2nd and 3rd rounder to the Titans to go get safety Nick Emmanwori. And this pick, I'm giving a flat-out A, because I had the 11th ranked player on my big board in Emmanwori, and I also had him as a positional need to an extent. Even though the Seahawks have 2 starting safeties, we look at the corner position and the free agents they've got looming. Emmanwori has been a cornerback before, so I looked at it from that perspective, and just the athlete that he is, the talent. You can make a very strong argument the Seahawks ended up with 2 top 15 caliber selections with pick 18 and pick 35. We know the athlete, we know the production as a tackler and in the secondary, and yet there's still so much room for him to grow. And I just can't think of a better coach to pair him with than Mike McDonald. So scheme fit wise, to me, this is an A as well. So I'm going with an A on this selection.
No, again, I mean, it sounds like we are just going to kind of be mimicking each other here, at least for the first couple of selections, just because of the fact that I just think that the boldness of this selection by the Seahawks. Of course, you and I have been covering the Seattle for an awful long time here, and we do not see John Schneider and the Seahawks make a dramatic trade up like this. And I think that Nick Emmanwori is exactly the type of player that justifies a bold move like that. And so, again, I'm going to go with an A, not an A minus, but an A. I don't do A pluses. And we're again, as you mentioned,
you and I both don't.
I live in the public school world where A pluses aren't generally, accepted. And so if you're expecting an A plus from me, you're not going to get it. But I do think that an A grade is justified here with Nick Emmanwori, a 3-year standout, obviously against elite competition. I kind of struggle a little bit with actually, is this a position of critical need for the Seahawks? But that to me is not so much as an important of a factor as durability, as versatility, as level of competition, and again, just the upside that this young man presents to me, given the fact that Seattle made the big trade up for him and that you got him in a position of value. You didn't have to give up that much to get him. You got him in the second round rather than trading up in the late portion of the first round. I just think that this screams A grade for the Seahawks.
We've got 2 more picks on day 2 to cover. We've got Elijah Arroyo at pick number 50, the tight end from Miami, as well as Jalen Milroe, the quarterback out of Alabama, at pick 92. For Arroyo, this was actually one of the picks that I had the lowest grade for on my grading. And I gave this selection a B minus because I truly view this as a boom or bust selection by every sense of the word. Do I think there's some need at tight end? Yes. Noah Fant could be a free agent after this year, and Fant has not lived up to the expectations that were set when he came over in the Russell Wilson trade. He's had his moments, but you've got A.J. Barner, and then there's not much production. So Arroyo was certainly a player that they could use, but he's not much of a blocker, at least to this point has not been much of a blocker. He can do the move blocking, but he's not an inline guy, and he's had a bunch of injuries. He's really only had one healthy season in his college career at Miami. Look, I know he's a great athlete. I get that. He's a phenomenal athlete. But the production hasn't been there aside from parts of last year, and he was still inconsistent in that offense. It just feels like a very boom or bust selection. I could see him being a star. I could see this being 1-2 years from now. Seattle says, man, there were a lot of really good players like Siobhan Ravel Jr., Darian Porter at corner, just a couple examples. We could have picked one of those guys that had been, at least in the case of Porter, been more durable and helped our cornerback, our secondary room. So I think that this is one that we could look back on and there could be some regret. I could also see him be an absolute standout. And Jalen Milroe, I'm giving it an A minus just because this is an incredibly talented kid. And at pick 92, you can throw some darts and try to see if you can make something stick with a player like this. And you're not in a position where you have to rush him onto the field. This was the type of team that could afford to make that selection, develop Milroe. And if you can do that, he could end up being an absolute star a few years from now and be your quarterback of the future and quarterback for a long time here in Seattle. And if it doesn't work out, look, it's pick 92. You took your shot. Hopefully you can at least get some rushing out of him. So I'm going B minus for Arroyo and A minus for Milroe.
Yeah, I just went with B's for both players. I just think for all the different reasons that you just articulated as far as, Elijah Arroyo, the fact that there is a great deal of upside to him, the durability concerns, of course, tempers your enthusiasm a little bit, but I'm just going to go with a solid B grade on him. I obviously a B grade, not going to, explain anything too deep here, but a B grade is in the middle point between an A and a C grade. An A grade to me suggests that this is a guy that just checks off every single box. A C grade just being somebody that basically is just, hey, it's your run-of-the-mill type of a selection. To me, there is so much upside that it jumps it up a little bit. There is some downside here with the lack of durability. And the questions about, is he going to be able to contribute much as a blocker? How quickly is he actually going to be able to get onto the field? Because you do have the aforementioned Noah Fant, who is going to be looking to make a splash with this, his final season of his current contract, already working out with Sam Darnold. So Elijah Arroyo, as much upside as he might offer, is he actually going to be able to get onto the field for the Seahawks and be able to justify, say, an A grade? I have some questions about that, even though, again, I am very intrigued by his upside. So to me, it's a solid B grade. And I would make the same argument here with Jalen Monroe. I mean, obviously, the athletic potential just speaks for itself. But at the same time, you also wonder, like, if you're going to give a player an A grade that may come onto the field just a handful of snaps a game, perhaps at best, then that's pretty hard to justify in my brain, especially, having watched the tape at the Senior Bowl where anything close to an A, I mean, maybe A is now Alabama, but not A in terms of accuracy when you saw Jalen Monroe. But at the same time, I know that the word upside does not start with the A, but my goodness, does Jalen Monroe possess that type of upside? And I am very excited about the possibility of Seattle just kind of getting themselves in line with the tush-push revolution that we seem to be seeing throughout all of the NFL. That, to me, is one of the most exciting aspects of this fact. It is that Seattle, it feels like they are a little bit ahead of the curve. Rather than being too reactionary, they are recognizing the fact that that's just the way that the NFL game is going. Frankly, it's following a little bit of the way that the CFL game is going. These dual threat quarterbacks, Corbin, really can give your offense a whole different dynamic. And that's why, again, with Jalen Monroe, I think that any grade other than a B or higher is just kind of not recognizing the athletic potential that Monroe possesses.
When we come back, we've got 7 day 3 selections that we've got to hand out grades for, just as important as the first 4 picks. We're going to dive into those coming up next here on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you just stop managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized how much I was spending on fast food delivery. Now I budget smarter and I save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan your long-term goals. Managing money with your partner has never been easier. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Continuing to dish out our draft grades for all 11 picks. We've got 7 day 3 selections. John Schneider went cuckoo on day 3 with the trades, got himself a couple extra picks. And so we've got a number of players to dive into. Let's start with the first one that was the result of the Sam Howell trade, moving up in a pick swap to 142. Riley Mills, the defensive end from Notre Dame. This one I'm giving a solid B because I think that this guy has day 2 talent, but we don't know when he's going to be available. He seems to think he's going to be ready to return to football activities before training camp. John Schneider was not ready to be that optimistic when he was talking to reporters. So we'll see when he gets in the field. If he ends up missing the entire season, then it really becomes a wash. But if you can get him back early or middle of the season, he's able to come in and contribute the way that we believe he can if healthy. This is a versatile player that can play multiple spots. He's got pass rushing productivity potential. So I'm giving this a B just because of the talent here. And this is a need. They had to add some depth to their defensive line, especially after losing Roy Robertson Harris. I think that this is your natural replacement in that rotation that can do a lot of the same things.
I 100% agree with you. Again, I'm going to give a similar grade, a little bit slightly lower. I'm going to go with a B minus here because of the fact that he is coming off the injury, because as you just mentioned, the fact that you don't feel 100% confident that he's going to be able to actually make an impact in his rookie season. Now, as you said, Ryan Miller certainly feels very confident that he's going to be able to play. I mean, he's suggesting he's going to be back for training camp, for the preseason. I'm a little bit more skeptical about that. I just think that you want to give the young man plenty of opportunity to be able to come back from that torn ACL that was suffered in January. And so again, you want to give him enough time to be able to come back and be the long-term NFL starter rather than just being greedy and going for it this upcoming season. But there's no question about that he is a fit for the Seahawks in terms of his size, his power, his flexibility, the untapped potential that we've seen from him as a pass rusher. Look, I was using that comparison to Roy Robertson-Harris as well, because I do think that he has the physicality that you're looking for, but he also gives a little bit more pass rush than Roy Robertson-Harris has. So again, all the more reason to allow him some more time to really get right. So I'm going to go with a B- here. I think it's a better selection than most that you are likely to see here. I love the upside that he provides, but at the same time, I also think that there's a possibility he's not able to provide much as a rookie, and that's why I have to temper my enthusiasm at least a little bit.
We've got two other fifth-round picks here. Coming in at 166, Torrey Horton, the receiver out of Colorado State. And then at 175, Robbie Oots, the fullback from Alabama, the mustached fullback. And these two picks, I like both players, but I have much different grades. And there's one big reason why. Torrey Horton, I'm giving an A- because this is the guy that's a multi-time 1,000-yard receiver at Colorado State. He didn't have good quarterback play, and he still put up those numbers. I know he had injuries last year. He's also returned 3 punts for touchdowns in his college career. I think he comes in day one and he gives the Seahawks a major upgrade in their punt return game. He's dynamic with 4.3 speed. He's got the size and the catch radius to cause problems for opposing cornerbacks. I think he's got a chance to push Marquez Valdes-Scantling off the top of the depth chart early. I think Horton can take that job as a rookie because to me, he is a much more polished version of Marquez Valdes-Scantling. So I'm giving this one an A-. As for Oots, I'm giving it a C+, and it's not anybody listening to our show knows I love fullbacks, and I'm so excited about a 274-pound mustachioed man bashing people. I would love this pick if it was a 7th rounder or even a 6th, but there were some really good corners and interior defensive linemen that were still on the board at pick 175. I just look from a positional value standpoint and what was available. I had to give a C+ in this one. It's not necessarily even a negative there, and I get it. The Seahawks were just targeting guys they wanted, and at the end, they got some guys that I think were 5th-round value later, but I'm still giving this one a C+.
Yeah, interesting, because this is going to be the widest variance between your grade and my grade, and it's going to be with Robbie Oots. And I'll just kind of mention him first and then kind of go back to Torrey Horton in a moment. I'll just kind of, throw the cat out of the bag right now. I gave both players an A- in terms of my individual grades. Look, I understand your reservations with Oots in terms of the positional and value in the late portion of the 5th round, for a fullback. I get it. I also thought that he was a perfect schematic fit, a perfect, kind of style and personality fit for the Seahawks. I think that this selection to me makes a statement to the rest of the NFL that we are going to knock you on your backside. And I love the fact that they went with an Alabama player, at this point, in the draft, because again, this isn't a fullback that you have to wonder about the level of competition. This is a guy who, again, has been productive. He also gives you a little bit of soft hands as well. I'm really excited about Robbie Oots. And if you're going to mention the mustachio thing, I'm just going to love the fact that, I just can't wait to hear the crowd at the stadium basically just say, Oots, Oots, Oots. This, to me, that is.
Every time it makes a big block, Oots, there it is.
Exactly. I think that we're going to hear an awful lot of that. And I think it's going to make him a fan favorite. So again, I kind of struggle with the idea of giving any of these Seahawks selections a late pick or a lower grade than a B, when my ultimate grade for the Seahawks, and again, this is on foxsports.com right now, my ultimate grade for the Seahawks is one of just 3 straight up A's in this entire draft cycle. So again, very excited about Robbie Oots, the rest of the Seahawks, and then finally Torrey Horton. As you said, Corbin, you gave him an A-, and I'm going to go again with the A- myself for all the reasons that you just said: his size, his straight line speed, the production, the special teams ability, and I had him graded as a third-round selection. So again, I struggled with not giving him just a straight up A. But at the same time, again, the fact that he is coming off of an injury, the fact that I do believe that it is going to be difficult for him to get any kind of meaningful snaps as a wide receiver, as a rookie, just because of the fact that I am intrigued by what Seattle currently has on their roster. They got some guys that, Marquez Valdes-Scantling isn't exactly polished, but at the same time, he is a proven veteran. And so that's why I couldn't give him an actual A, but I definitely think he has A upside.
Let's go to the final 2 rounds, shall we? 6th round, Seahawks did not have a pick going into this draft in that round, but John Schneider, one of his trade downs, got them pick 192. They used that on Bryce Cabledew, the tackle now turned guard from Kansas, and I gave this one a B+. I couldn't quite go to the A realm just because I do have some reservations about the pass protection looking back historically for him. He was much better this past season. Maybe going inside is going to benefit him from that standpoint, but you can't deny the athleticism. You cannot deny the run blocking, one of the best zone blocking guards or tackles actually the last 3 years in college football, according to Pro Football Focus. And the athleticism shows up there. So if the pass pro evens out, look, there's a chance that he could be somebody that pushes someone like Anthony Bradford off the roster because he is a better scheme fit. And so I went with a B+ for him. That's for the first 7th rounder. Damian Martinez, I'm going A- on that one. I had him as my 14th ranked running back, but in this class, that was still pretty darn good. I had a 4th round grade on him. That's how good this running back class was. It was just phenomenal. And Martinez was still there early in the 7th. He was a star at Oregon State. He was a star running the ball for Miami. He never had a year with under 6 yards per carry in college, Ron. This guy has been a prolific runner. He's physical. He's a really good zone runner. I think Kenny McIntosh needs to be looking in the rearview mirror because this kid is going to be coming full speed ahead, looking to take his roster spot. So keep an eye on Damian Martinez. I got an A- there.
No, I have A's on both these players, and A's, not A-. I just think that Cabledew to me was a steal in the 6th round. I think the Damian Martinez, same point, it is an A or is a steal in the 7th round. Look, Damian Martinez didn't have the best 40-yard dash time. I give 2 craps about 40-yard dash time when it comes to the 7th round running back that has been highly productive in 2 very different systems at Oregon State and at Miami. Against the Pac-12 and against ACC competition. I just see a guy that plays with the physicality the Seahawks have always prioritized. I think that he is a terrific fit in a wide zone blocking system because that he has better burst, that he has elite straight line speed. And again, just the vision. I think that this is a selection that not only, as you mentioned, with some of the other backs on Seattle's roster, I think that this is a guy that can push for meaningful snaps, not just Kenny McIntosh 5 snaps a game kind of talk, but Zach Charbonnet, I think, it needs to be paying attention. Look, I'm a big fan of Zach Charbonnet. I'm a big fan of Kenneth Walker III, but I see Damian Martinez as being a back that absolutely has legitimate NFL starting potential to him. Sure, he needs to improve in pass protection. He needs to become a better receiver out of the backfield. But as far as just being kind of that bell cow runner, to me, the mindset, the size, the good enough speed for what the Seahawks are going to ask him to do, I think that he is a potentially a terrific steal of a pick for the Seahawks in the 7th round. I mean, again, I think that is one that the Seahawks fans should be excited about. And the same thing with Bryce Cabledew. Excuse me. I just think that the athletic ability, again, the positional versatility. He played tackle at Kansas. Obviously, he's going to move inside to guard for the Seahawks. I'm stunned that he was still on the board. Both of these players still available at the point that they were, considering the fact that both of them were highly successful players over the course of their entire college careers.
Going on to our last 2 selections, the final 2 in the 7th, 234, 238. We start with Mason Richman, the tackle out of Iowa. And Man, Rob, I don't know that I've ever been more confused in the Seahawks media draft room on what position a guy was going to play than Mason Richmond, because he was announced on the TV as a tackle. Then we were told, oh, he's going to be a guard. And then John Schneider says, no, he's going to be a tackle to start. But then Mike McDonald says, well, but he might move inside. I don't know that the Seahawks have any idea what they are going to do with him. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a 7th rounder. He started 52 games at left tackle in the Big Ten. That stands for something. That being said, there comes a point where the athletic testing shows up in a 5.35 40-yard dash, a really slow 10-yard split. I have reservations about him playing inside or the tackle position despite the experience. That experience gives him a fighting chance, but he also has 32-inch arms. Cable Dew has 33-inch arms. I just think there's going to be a lot working against Richmond, and Mike Jarrell is going to be much more seasoned going into year 2. He signed Josh Jones. I'm giving this one a C+ just because at that point of the draft, you can go after the best player you can. And if you like the kid and go for it, I just think he's going to have a really difficult time with the roster that the Seahawks have right now, making much of a dent. Maybe he's a practice squatter, but I'm going to go with a C+. And my other A grade for this draft, if I believed in giving A pluses, it would have gone to this pick. Ricky White III was a late 4th-round pick on my draft board. And when you watch UNLV, we're going to talk about another player that was part of this here in a few minutes, but UNLV has historically, in the last 15, 20 years, been one of the bottom feeders in all of college football. And Ricky White comes to town, and he was maybe the biggest reason why they ended up being in the top 25 for a large chunk this last season. He's tough. He gets after as a blocker. 2,000-yard season. He scored 11 touchdowns last year. Doesn't drop the football very much. He is a revered leader in the locker room and on the field. Leads by example. Not a big mouth, but he just goes out and gets the job done. I just think this kid is incredibly tough. And then you add in the blocked punts, 4 of them last year. I think he's going to be an instant star on special teams for the Seahawks. He might be your main kick returner, even though he didn't do it very much at UNLV. He returned 4 punts his entire career last year, went out. All he did is return one of them for a touchdown. He is just a football player. So I'm giving Ricky White an A.
Yeah, I went with a B- for Mason Richmond and a B+ for Ricky White III. As you mentioned, I also had a fifth round grade on Ricky White. And I was kind of actually hoping that he might slip through the cracks. When he ran the 4.6s, I thought that my BC Lions might be a possible candidate for him. So, hey, credit to the Seahawks for recognizing the talent that he is. At the 40-yard dash time, it can be incredibly overrated. But at the same time, he doesn't have that elite juice that some of the other wide receivers in this class have, and that's why he dropped all the way to number 238 overall. With Mason Richmond, it is the fact that a lot of people view him as a little bit of a tweener. I'm intrigued by him. So, again, that's why the grade was there in the Bs. But at the same time, 4-year starter, 52-game starter for Kirk Ferentz and the Iowa Hawkeyes. Look, just sign me up every single time. I remember Alaric Jackson, who was a starter tackle for Iowa, that wound up falling all the way in the 7th round. The Los Angeles Rams made him, and now he is their starting left tackle. So again, I think that sometimes you can get a little bit, or at least some can get a little bit, over their skis, so to speak, when they start thinking about, oh, he doesn't have this measurable, he doesn't have that measurable. Just throw all that crap out the window, watch the tape, and you'll understand why these guys are legitimate NFL players that maybe are better football players than they are athletes. And isn't that the point? And so, again, I think that when you're looking for guys that can surprise in the 7th round, go for the guys who have been consistent multiple-year starters. Ricky White III, Mason Richmond, certainly check those boxes for the Seahawks.
When we come back, we're going to shift away from the draft picks for a moment, and we're going to talk UDFAs, the undrafted free agents the Seahawks reportedly have signed. We're going to get to those coming up next year on our Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. The NBA playoffs are well underway, and FanDuel is giving customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you sign up with FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my Golden State Warriors to finish off the Houston Rockets or diving into player props. From Steph Curry three-pointers to Jimmy Butler steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you could even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com today and claim your $250 in bonus bets. Welcome back to the Tuesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, and thank you as always for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Let's dive into the undrafted ranks. John Schneider has been as good as any general manager with his scouting department in the NFL the last 16 years at unearthing quality players in the undrafted ranks. Just this last year, Jalen Sundell came out of nowhere and made the roster, and now there's discussions he might be your starting center in 2025. Right now, we've got 15 reported signings, and I want to make sure that we make this clear. The Seahawks, they usually are one of the last teams that announce their signings. It's typically right before rookie minicamp starts, which is on Friday. They will announce which one of these signings is official. There's usually one or two, at least, players that were announced as signings that end up going elsewhere, and then there's one or two guys that weren't linked that signed to the Seahawks. So we'll see what the list looks like, but this is the reports we've gotten. Rob, I want to start on the defensive side of the ball because we know Seattle picked 9 offensive players and only 2 defensive players. That made this a really ideal place for defensive undrafted free agents to want to sign in Seattle. And you've got some really good ones, starting off with my highest ranked free agent that the Seahawks signed. He was 153 on my big board, Jared Ivey. He did not test well. He's a bit of a plotter, but he's a dang good football player. And I think he is a player that has a really good chance to push Mike Morris and even potentially take Mike Morris's job. He is built similarly, a little bit lighter, but he's 6'6". You can get this guy to 290 pounds real quick, and he's not going to lose much speed. He's not a speedster anyway, but he's kind of slithery for being a guy that's not a great testing athlete, and he has bricks for hands. Really productive player that increased his sacks every year he was at Ole Miss. I'm a little surprised that somebody didn't take a late round flyer just because of the football talent. I get the athleticism concerns, but playing him as a big end or even a 3-tech in this scheme, I think Mike McDonald can get a lot out of this kid. To me, he's the headliner with several defensive players that could maybe have a chance to make this team.
No, I think that he certainly is the most productive of the players that the Seahawks brought in, as at least reported undrafted free agents, or that they have made agreements with them to bring in as undrafted free agents. I mean, look, this is a guy that originally signed with Georgia Tech, transferred to Ole Miss, and then was incredibly productive at Mississippi over the last several years. I mean, 34 tackles for loss, 17 and a half sacks, 4 forced fumbles over the last 4 seasons. And he's 6'6", 274 pounds. Now, you acknowledge the fact that he wasn't very productive, in workouts. He did not perform at all at the combine, waited till his pro day, and then when at his pro day, he was not very impressive. There's just no other way of saying it. 280 or 274 pounds, still running a 5.16 in the 40-yard dash with a 30.5-inch vertical jump. Only 16 repetitions in the 225 pounds. The NFL scouts were kind of turned off by his performance. But at the same time, as we just talked about with Mason Richmond, the offensive lineman from Iowa that Seattle thought highly enough to invest a 7th-round selection, you got to throw out those numbers sometimes of workouts and go back to the tape. And as you mentioned, the production against elite competition, the size, and then the positional versatility. I think that makes an awful lot of sense for the Seahawks. So I would agree with you. To me, he is one of the most intriguing. I'll go with Jackson Woodard, the inside linebacker or off-ball linebacker, I guess I should say, for UNLV. We referenced Ricky White III, of course, as being one of the big reasons why they were so successful this past season. I think that Jackson Woodard, who followed Barry Odom, who was the defensive coordinator at Arkansas, to UNLV. Odom took the head coaching job there. Woodard was one of several players that were originally at Arkansas and then made that switch over to UNLV. Look, Jackson Woodard had 4 interceptions this past season at at UNLV, and he's just his instincts, the awareness of the football, the physicality in terms of run support. He's 6'3", he's 230 pounds. I thought that he should have been drafted. Obviously, off-ball linebacker is a little bit of a position concern for the Seahawks in terms of depth. So to me, whether it be Jared Ivey, whether it be Jackson Woodard, a couple of corners who I'm intrigued by this undrafted free agent class as well, I 100% agree with you, though, sir, that I do think that the strength of this year's undrafted free agent class is on defense, which makes sense considering the strength of the actual drafted class for the Seahawks was very much on offense.
Yeah, and you mentioned the corners. I want to talk about one specifically, and a lot of people listening to the show are going to be like, why isn't Zy Alexander the first one that you're going to be talking about coming from LSU? I have Isaac Waxter from Villanova higher on my big board. I've watched film on both these guys. Do I think both of them have a chance to make this football team? Yeah, they didn't draft a corner, and there's a big gap there depth-wise. I think Isaac Waxter can come in and push Nehemiah Pritchett. I am that impressed by what I've seen. He is a sound tackler. He's physical. He's 6'2", 210 pounds. I could see him being a safety too. Seattle could keep him on the roster as kind of one of those hybrid guys that can play special teams. He's had a few injuries in the past. He missed an entire season at one point. That was part of the reason. And you look at the competition as well. Didn't have the best testing, but he wasn't terrible. I just think Waxter on tape, I see a more complete player. Alexander has had production, but he's also given up a lot of chunk plays in coverage, and that is my biggest concern. He ran in the mid 4.5s. That's my big concern there, is that he seems like he's a guy that if he gets beat, he's not able to recover and doesn't have the speed to get back and make plays in the football. So I actually like Waxter a little bit better of these two players, but I could see either one of them making a run because of the depth concern Seattle has at the cornerback spot. Real quick on offense. As you mentioned, as I alluded to, I look at the offensive players that Seattle signed, and we have a couple other defensive guys on here. J.R. Singleton, the defensive lineman from Iowa State, is one I'm intrigued by just from his athletic testing, and he has good numbers for a good football program at Iowa State. But from an offensive standpoint, I don't see a single player in here that jumps out to me that I think has a real shot at pushing for a position on the roster. That doesn't mean that there's not somebody, though, that's intriguing. Tyrone Broden from Arkansas started his career at Bowling Green. He is 6'7" and runs in the 4.3s. He's like talking like a power forward, a skinny power forward in the NBA that's running in the 4.3s. There's decent receiving production. He has not been an efficient target. He has been a jump ball downfield guy. That's what he does. But I'm intrigued to watch this guy just because of his size and his speed. It'll make a fascinating player to keep an eye on during the rookie training, or rookie mini camp, OTAs, and if he's still on the roster in training camp.
Yeah, as you said, I mean, Broden from Arkansas has some flashy traits about him. He had a terrific pro day workout, 4.38 40-yard dash, 1.51 in the 10-yard split, an 11.4-inch broad jump, a 4.40 in the short shuttle, 7.07 in the three cone. So for a guy of his height to be able to change directions the way that he does, to me, is very intriguing as well. I'll mention another guy, and actually a former wide receiver who actually played as edge rusher for Utah. Connor O'Toole is a guy that, again, is very intriguing. He's 6'0", so 6'3" and a quarter inch, 250 pounds. He was a former wide receiver himself, Corbin, when he signed with Utah. He did struggle with injuries over his career, but at the same time, you watch him on tape as an edge rusher, defensive end, hand in the ground, as well as at the 2-point stance as well. There is some physicality to him. And so to me, again, a guy that has some obviously some warts to him in terms of durability and the fact that he is making the positional change. But in terms of practice squad candidates, Connor O'Toole, to me, is one of the more intriguing signs the Seahawks had, at least reportedly, of the undrafted free agent period.
I'll mention Federico Moranguez, the center from Florida Atlantic as well, just because he tested fairly well, and this is a guy that had good pass protection numbers. He graded out well as his own blocker the last 2 years. He's a little bit bigger than a couple of the centers that Seattle has on the roster. I think he's a long shot, but again, this is a position that now only has 3 players with Mike Nowitzki being released today. So he's got an opportunity there. If he ends up pushing Jalen Sundell, then maybe Morangas can hang around. But those are the players that stand out as far as ones that could make a push. There's always a surprise. Sundell was that guy last year. Maybe a player we didn't talk about here ends up being that undrafted rookie that makes waves. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky, Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up on tomorrow's show, I'll be riding solo. It's a way too early 53-man roster projection. I'm going to be diving into that and looking at some of the moves that happened today as well. And make sure to mark your calendars for Friday. We are going to have the coach of Cam Chancellor and Nick Emmanwori. Torian Gray, the DB coach from South Carolina, will be joining the show to kick off our draft pick coaches series. So make sure that you have the bookmarked for 4 p.m. Pacific time on Friday. Thanks for listening in and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Go Hawks.